everybody, and welcome along to another brand new video where it's been a little while since we've done really a sort of new release review or discussion, I guess. But this week, of course, we saw the new release of The Power of the Daleks, a special edition, sort of re-updated version of the original animation that was released in 2016. And so today, I'm kind of reviewing it, but I also kind of just want to show you guys where the improvements lie and what benefit you get by purchasing it, basically, and to kind of help you decide, is it actually worth spending 15 odd quid on it, or shall I just hold on to the one I got 4 years ago? So hopefully I can kind of make that idea a little bit clearer for you. We're going to have a look at a little animation comparison to try and show the improvements there, and also look at the vastly expanded range of special features that are included on this release. So firstly, I think it's a good point to kind of discuss the context, discuss why have we actually got this release, because many people sort of on the surface saw it and were like, well, didn't we get that a few years ago? I'd prefer to have a new story animated that doesn't exist rather than them just rehashing another old one. And to a large extent, I agree with you. I'm more interested in getting new animations, like of course Fury from the Deep, that's hopefully going to be coming in the next few months, and like we've had with the Faceless Ones and Macroterra and so on and so forth. But essentially the background behind it, which is really well explained actually in the sort of booklet that comes with this release, as to exactly what's happened with Power of the Daleks over many years, because it was originally floated in as an idea as early as 2006, back when they did the animation of The Invasion. They sort of debated all the way back then that, oh, well, maybe it could be an interesting idea at some point if we were to animate a whole classic Who story, and it seemed Power of the Daleks was the one to choose. That obviously didn't happen, and eventually it came together in 2016, but one of the key sort of problems was in 2016, firstly, they hadn't ever done it before, so it was kind of quite a new thing to try and have to develop. They also had basically no time compared to what they normally would have to do it. They sort of originally asked for, I think, nearly a year, and because of wanting to get the release out in time for the 50th anniversary of the story in 2016 in November, it meant that they basically had to do sort of 9 to 12 months worth of work in about 5 or 6 months, which simply meant that there was a lot of compromises that had been made in the process of animating it, in some of the more action-oriented scenes, a lot of the character movement, things like that, where there just wasn't fundamentally the time to be able to properly go in depth and really do a great job of a lot of it. So it meant a lot of it was rushed. Some of it, just generally, the animators and the production team were not very happy with what they'd done, and always kind of felt that if there was ever an opportunity to improve it, redo it, make it how they really wanted their vision, they wanted it to be, then they would take the opportunity. And so I think last year it sort of came up as a possibility that, would we like to redo this? It's Patrick Troughton's 100 years since he was born this year, of course, hence why we've been getting all these Troughton releases, with the Faceless Ones, Fury from the Deep later in the year, and this one sort of wedged in between with Power of the Daleks. It kind of all just came together from that, really. So it meant that they wanted to really just work everything they can into improving the animation and make it what the sort of animators and the production teams themselves originally wanted it to be. So more fundamentally, what does this actually mean in terms of the differences that are seen within the animation? Well, they talk about the fact that basically every single shot has been updated or improved in some form. So really, when you go and look at it, there's barely anything in there that is identical to what there was originally. And bearing in mind this is a 2.5-hour story, it meant there has been a lot of changes and updates done, particularly in terms of sort of character movement, so it doesn't look like they're kind of really jerkily, awkwardly kind of either moving or floating across the floor or things like that you saw in some of the shots. Just some of the backgrounds and sort of settings have been improved, lighting's been improved. Just generally animation, facial expressions, a lot of stuff about Lesterson in episode 5, that's been substantially improved. A whole bunch of episode 1's been improved as well. And actually I can give you guys a little comparison now, so let's take a little watch of that.
His face, his hand, look at it! He's breathing. The TARDIS seems to be normal.
Hey, what are we going to do? We can't just leave the doctor there.
But him? The doctor?
That's who came through the doors. There was no one else outside. Ben, do you remember what he said in the tracking room? Something about this old body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
So he gets himself a new one?
Well, yes.
Do me a favour.
Ben, whatever happened in here.
But it's impossible!
So long ago, we'd have been saying that about a lot of things. Ben.
So hopefully that gives you a good insight just into just an initial scene there that's about 1 minute into episode 1. And you can see virtually every shot has been redone in some form or from a slightly different angle, just slightly improved upon. Certainly the whole TARDIS set looks a lot better. The lighting's massively improved compared to what we had in the previous release, and just the character movement, there's so much less of that just like static, that just Polly and Ben just stood there kind of turning their head when they're talking. You see them bending down to the Doctor, getting back up again. It just shows how much more can be done now that they actually had the time and the money and the ability to be able to improve on it and work on it. So I think that's something that's seen throughout. Episode 1 is very much the kind of probably most substantially different episode, if it's not better to say, because that episode was simply the most rushed one at the very beginning of the original animation, and so naturally it needed the most improvement for this special edition, so that's what they focused on. But there's still a lot of improvements throughout the whole story, and just little things like tidying up where there's some dead air that's just not needed, just shortening a couple of seconds out where you've just, in the previous one, just had really long periods of basically silence from the sound, where it's just kind of characters pointlessly moving their head around and not really doing anything, which just didn't really add anything to the animation or the story. So they've just kind of cut those down a little bit, I think, which is really, really good. So that's kind of the basis of some of the animation. So now I'm going to take you guys through the special features, firstly looking at what was on the 2016 release, and then comparing to what the 2020 release has to offer as well. Just showing the massively expanded range of special features we've got, but also a little mention I'll give you guys to the removed scene from this story, the 16 seconds of footage that was taken out, which has become a little bit controversial. But anyway, let's have a look at the special features that are available. So let's take a look here first at the 2016 release of Power of the Daleks, particularly this is actually the Steelbook edition, and it just gives us an opportunity to look at what features were originally available and stored on the original version of Power of the Daleks, as opposed to what was re-added on and introduced into the special edition. So we can see here we've got the animation and photo gallery, animation test footage, just the title sequence, which has been removed from the new one because it's just on so many other releases. You've got a roughly sort of 22-25 minute making of, which is also on the special edition. The surviving material, which is only really around sort of 6 minutes or so. I think there's been a very slight additional stuff added to the special edition version, and also the original trailer they put together as well, which is also included on the special edition, and then 5 minutes or so of original Dalek recordings that were the sort of original recordings that were done in the studios back in the 60s. They've managed to extract some of that session basically and include it. So it means based on this set of special features, we're very much only looking at sort of maybe 10, 15, sort of 17, 18, then that's about 22, so 40, maybe 50 minutes of special features there. So it's okay, it's a pretty solid selection of things, but it's nothing too special, I think we'd say. Now we move to the wonderful looking 2020 special edition, where we can see the menus themselves. They look very much in the ilk of the collection Blu-ray range. They've clearly taken exactly the same template to use to be able to create these. And this one I'm going to have to kind of split up a little bit, because there are special features across all 3 discs of this story, not just one sort of special features disc, as it were. So the main thing is the animation gallery on this disc, which is just 10 minutes of the sort of drawings. I think it's pretty much the same thing carried over from the original version, so there's not really anything majorly new there. This is also where the very controversial Easter egg scene is stored, so we can probably have a quick look at that. You can probably see me there hidden away behind the camera. So yeah, that's just saying that they decided to take it out of the story, and this is what it originally looked like. So yeah, obviously it's quite highly debatable whether it was the right decision to take it out or not, but that's what they decided to do. But you can still access it again from, as I say, from the special features in Easter egg. You just click right on Animation Gallery, and there it is, easily accessible right next to the full story itself. So now let's take a look at the second disc of special features on the Power of the Daleks Special Edition. You've got the reconstruction, the telesnap reconstruction, which is the main bulk of disc 2. The 2.5 hours or so uncut telesnaps put together with the sort of original audio and subtitling and things like that. The moving footage where it's available is also included, so it's very much a comprehensive, well done reconstruction. They're not quite so much for me, but I've had a quick skim through it, and I think for the sort of thing it is, and for what some people like in that kind of thing, it does look quite impressive. So if we have a look at the special features, there's the 1993 audio audiobook, which is just another version of it, basically with narration from Tom Baker, rather slightly bizarrely at points. But that's something that I don't believe was on the original release, so that's quite a nice addition to have. As we saw on the previous one, there's the BBC One trailer and the surviving footage, the title sequence, the Dalek recordings, but they've added a nice little section here which is about 15 or 16 minutes of clean incidental music, because this story was basically made up of music from previous Dalek stories by Tristram Carey, like for stories, so music from the Daleks predominantly, as well as from Dalek Master Plan, I think maybe a little bit from The Chase as well, so it just kind of brought together bits of previously used and released music as well, which just means that you get a really nice sort of 15-minute suite of music you can just kind of stick on in the background there in the incidental music section, and also this photogrammetry, which is a really rather interesting idea, which is basically taking set photos from the original set and turning them into like 3D models, where then the camera can kind of pan round and kind of show you a sort of computer generated idea of what the set would have looked like if we were really there. So it's just a really interesting idea that actually works quite well, I think. And yet, along with the photo gallery, of course, it completes the Disc 2 special features. So Disc 3, this is really where the sort of predominant set of special features are included within this story. So if we take a look here, there's 2 pages of them. It's quite substantial. The sort of obvious new items are these first 2 at the top here, the Paradoleks from Script to Screen, which is kind of just another documentary looking at the kind of development of the script and basically how the story came together, which kind of works as a bit of a companion piece to the Servants and Masters making of the Paradoleks feature, which is good, the making of, but it is from 2016. It's only about 22 minutes or so long. It's not that in depth compared to the Script to Screen feature, which is around nearly 45 minutes, really well narrated by Toby Haydock even, and just focusing using lots of sort of cast and crew interviews and things to just bring together the real story behind the creation of such an important and significant story. Then you've got the Paradoleks Behind the Scene, which is a really cool actually little featurette with Mike Tucker, who was one of the original Doctor Who effects and model designers and things who used to put together all those different scenes, and basically he goes through and recreates the iconic scene of the Daleks on the production line being created. They get on the original film cameras and try and sort of recreate it how it would look back then with all these models and stuff, and it looks really effective by the end of it. It's a really interesting look into how they did it in the 60s and actually how much it is still able to recreate it in the same way now, I think, which is really cool. So that as I mentioned, that making of documentary from the previous release. This episode of Wicker's World is also new. Wicker's World, it was, I don't really know exactly what it was just way before my time, but it seemed to be like a program looking at sort of I think it focused on different sort of TV and film and sort of arts ideas. There was an episode focusing on sort of horror, fantasy and science fiction, so they got on Terry Nation for this particular episode, and there's this full episode of Wicker's World which doesn't wholly focus on Doctor Who. I've only watched a bit of it, I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but it looks quite interesting, and certainly visually it looks quite impressive. It's a 2K film scan, so it's pretty good quality to watch, and just an interesting insight into sort of 60s television and things which I always find quite interesting. Alongside that, there's Daleks The Early Years, which apparently was a documentary that was on the VHS range, I think in the early 1990s, with Peter Davison basically narrating a look through the early Dalek stories, like Dalek Invasion of Earth, The Chase, and this story Power of the Daleks. The picture quality is not great, but it's still quite an interesting insight, and it's just nice to have these sort of older documentaries that were created back when sort of they were originally starting to bring Doctor Who into physical media, and having to come up with other ideas to go with it, and just looking at the development of different documentaries and things. There's still, I haven't watched all of it again, I watched a little bit of it, and there's still some interesting things to it as well. So then we have the Robin Hood 1953 episode, which is really cool because this is basically the oldest existing piece of footage of Patrick Troughton acting from 1953. You think about that, that's nearly 70 years ago, and it's also apparently one of the oldest surviving pieces of footage from any television drama, having for some reason been saved in 1953. It's about 8 or 9 minutes of footage from a random episode of this BBC Robin Hood drama series that Patrick Troughton played the lead Robin Hood in, and is where the reference in Robot of Sherwood, of course, comes to Patrick Troughton's sort of seeing an image of him playing Robin Hood. This is from that. So the picture quality is not great, but it's kind of to be expected when it's from 1953. But it's just quite an interesting insight really into what television looked like back then, really, and just seeing Patrick Troughton in a completely different role, looking much younger, frankly. So it's just a really interesting look into it. And then there's these couple of bits here, just some sort of archive footage that's been turned up of a sort of convention. I think it was a couple of different conventions and things that Richard Latto, one of the producers on this, has managed to unearth to be able to include on this feature, which is really cool. So it's always good to have these little sort of archive features. So there's a couple of additional ones on there. Then a bunch more sort of archive things as well. A Blue Peter edition from just before Power of the Daleks aired. Then Newsnight as well, which ran a special apparently on programs from the 1960s because of various animations of new programs and things like that. So sort of back in this is sort of basically off the back of the 2016 release. They did a Newsnight report about it, and it's been included here. The same with the BBC Breakfast one. This sort of the advantages of doing a special edition of something after you've had the big release is kind of any of the news features that were done about the original release can then be included on the special edition when they couldn't obviously before it happened. So that's always quite nice. Some of the original animation trailers, which were created to promote the show, obviously, online, and then some test footage as well, which was just sort of much earlier footage that was initially put together when they were trying to kind of create Power of the Daleks originally, basically. Then along with some shots of the storyboards, and finally the BBC radio spots, which are again the sort of similar to the reports, where it's basically just people from the sort of involved in the animation went onto various local news stations and did a little bit of promo about it just before it was originally released in 2016, and yeah, just trying to sell it, and so you can have a little listen to that as well. So that covers off what's a pretty substantial set of special features. I did the maths on it, and I think compared to what we saw with the original release, which was solidly like 50 odd minutes of footage of sort of special features, if you don't include obviously the audio commentary, with this one you've got pretty much nearly 4 hours of special features, including a huge range of interesting documentaries, so many archive pieces of footage as well. It really does feel like a sort of something you'd get on the collection range, really, in terms of the amount of content that's been thrown into it. But it's just amazing that a story from 1966 can actually have so much sort of relevant, connected material to it, I think. It's really, really impressive to see. So, I mean, as I said, I haven't managed to get through all of the stuff yet because there's just so much of it. But it's just great to have all this great content to be able to enjoy, and really, alongside a brilliantly updated animation, is so much brilliant special features to enjoy as well. So hopefully that's given you guys a good breakdown of where all the new stuff basically that's on this release in terms of special features and things like that are included, which is fantastic. I believe it's across the DVD and the Blu-ray. You get all the exact same features, which are really, really cool. One thing that I know people will probably maybe comment about and have discussed in the run-up to this release is the lack of a colour version of this story, because of course when it was released in 2016 it was released in colour, and the more recent releases of things like the Macroterra and the Faceless ones have both also been released in colour. So the question of course is, why have we not got colour for Power of the Daleks? And the simple reason that the production team were given us is because they didn't want to do colour. They didn't feel that this story actually suited colour. And the key thing is, with the original release, it wasn't actually the sort of production and animation team who decided it was going to be in colour. They all did it in black and white. They wanted it to be in black and white. The lighting and everything was designed around black and white. And then a third party through BBC America, I think BBC America decided for an American audience on TV, they wanted to be in colour because it'll be more watchable. And so a third party somewhere basically afterwards just painted over the top of it with all the colouring. It wasn't in any way designed to be like that, it just kind of happened that way. And so it means that this production team, now being able to kind of properly do the release themselves, they feel like this is a story that's very much meant to be in black and white. It's designed to be in black and white, works best in that way, and so they didn't want to try and create a colour version to go with it, basically. Whereas they acknowledge that stories like the Macroterra or the Faceless ones kind of work really well in colour, they just felt that the sort of charm of this story was that it was in black and white, and so they were never going to go down that route. And because it was just a fairly shoddy, cheaply done colorization originally, they were never going to include that as part of this release. So you can still keep your original release and watch the colour edition, but there is no colour version there because of the simple production team decision behind it. So yes, hopefully that's given you guys a good overall look at the Power of the Daleks special edition. As to whether you want to buy it or not, that's totally up to you. I'm happy I did. I very much enjoyed watching the animation all over again. It does just feel like a even more engaging and enjoyable animation than the original one. The original one was not bad, but I just felt this one just had that extra little bit of just the extra quality to it, just enabled me to engage with the story that little bit better and get a little bit more enjoyment out of it. Plus this whole myriad of special features that I haven't even watched all of yet, I'm really enjoying going through and looking at. I'm a great one for VAM on Doctor Who releases, and so being able to enjoy all of these is just really, really fantastic. So for me, I mean obviously I'm nothing to do with the beam, it's not like I'm trying to promote the release or anything, but I personally appreciated buying it. I think it is a worthwhile purchase. It's also worth remembering that the more we buy these releases as well, the better chances there are for future animations and things like that. It's always important to, if you can afford to, support the animation range if we want to keep getting more and more of them in the future, which I certainly really hope we do. So yeah, overall guys, I really, really would highly rate this special edition. If you've got it, please do let me know in the comments below what you think of it, what do you feel like the improvements are worth it, if you've got any favourite special features as well, or just anything like that you'd like to say about the release, please do let me know down in the comments below. But apart from that, as always guys, hit that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new one. Goodbye!